Okay. So I've been talking a lot about the Middle East, and listen. I can continue to talk about disclosure, but I have to tell you, disclosure is connected to this. If I tried to explain it to you right now, you wouldn't believe me. The same way people didn't believe me in 2016 when I said a coup was happening. Same way people didn't believe me in 2000 when I said the church is trying to take over is being used to try to take over the country. Same thing as when I was 10 and I said, hey, I said what I said. So, listen, I have this theory that the aliens and the refugees, and when I say aliens, I have a positive association with that word, okay? So when I say it, I don't have any negative energy around it, okay? So I have this theory that the refugees, migrants, immigrants, aliens on the ground are the target of a long influence operation and a shield for the aliens that want to stay hidden. I know. So y'all are just gonna put a little pin in that, okay? Put a little pin in there. So here we go. It's because what I want to show here is how the U.S. was used to radicalize its own citizens against the Middle East and against its own best interests. Okay, so let's see if we can do that, okay? So if you've watched any of the most recent videos that I've done, you know that I'm covering the Zionist PR machine and then the U.S. PR machine that is coupling with it. And the Zionist PR machine did something. It engineered a powerful narrative post 9/11. I'm reading something. Post 9/11 that framed the Middle Eastern migration as a threat to Western civilization. Now, how did that Middle Eastern migration come to be? That's the question. Okay, because this migration ended up being used as part of a narrative to encourage Americans to buy more guns. So, with the 1996 Clean Break document that came out, neocons and Netanyahu wanted this document. Why? They said they're going to be going into 5 countries in 7 years. But the way that I heard it, the U.S. was being told that this was the plan, and they were going to enact it. And I say they because they're not working for me. They're not doing this in my name. So we had 1996 Clean Break document saying we're going to go into 5 countries in 7 years. And guess what? Conveniently, 9/11 took place. I had premonitions, waking and dreaming premonitions for an entire year leading up to 9/11. My wife will tell you that my anxiety was, and I don't typically have anxiety, but anxiety was so intense in me. She was going to be flying to New York 1 month before it happened, and I begged her not to go. I was crying and I had my arms around her and I was begging her not to fly because I knew something horrific was coming and I would never see her again. So 9/11 happened, USA goes to war. What do? We go right into those countries that the Clean Break document, which was written in 1996. This was a plan. Muslim countries are what? They are destabilized according to what? According to this plan, the 1996 Clean Break document. And then the Muslim citizens from these countries are dispersed. And the PR machine in this secrecy dome that we live in was activated to do what? We got it right here. The Zionist PR machine engineered a powerful narrative post 9/11 that reframed Middle Eastern migration as a threat to Western civilization. This serves strategic goals of justifying Israeli aggression, aligning global public opinion against Arabs and Muslims, and manipulating the West through fear. Do you have any idea how many guns were bought because of all this? 1996. They planned to go in 5 countries in 7 years, and then they used a PR machine to inoculate our minds against empathy for them. They didn't succeed completely, but they succeeded in pushing through wars in countries we did not want to go into. I cannot stress that enough to anyone from the Middle East who is listening to this. Americans did not want war. Someone else did. Someone else who a wonderful Muslim organization on Threads popped in onto one of my comments and said, you're owned by Israel. And I was like, fuck you don't know what you're talking about. Guess what? I was wrong. I was wrong. They were right. Thank you, brother, sister, whoever was behind that account, who put the little seed into my mind and began to wake me up. I actually went back and followed that. I went back and followed that account after I blocked them. I was wrong. And why was I wrong? I was wrong because I live in a country that has a Zionist PR machine funded by America and Israel. And they got into my head, and they got into my heart, and they convinced me that Israel was the victim. When in this fight, Israel is not the victim. She is the aggressor, and I love Israel. I'm speaking from a purely energetic frequency place, because those guys don't like me at all. But look, they created a narrative ecosystem that turned our minds and our hearts against an entire region. And what Trump did when he was just there was he made an effort, I think, I could be wrong, I need to stop using my platform on behalf of white men, because y'all just keep lying. I speak on behalf of you, and then you lie. Again and again and again and again. But what Trump did when he was there was he took this structure, this whole pretend world, and he threw a brick on it. And he said, we never should have done this. That is what he did. Now, does the Muslim community and folks who are supporting them narrative-wise pick up on this and roll with narrating the truth? Yes, there are folks out there who are going to do this. Remember, I'm a seer. I see what's coming. This is like a baton, a narrative baton. I crack it open, boom, and I give you the baton. Now go, tell your story. And tell it in a way that they hear you, they feel you, they see you, they know you. And listen to the folks who woke me up. If you're on social media, keep telling Americans the truth. Don't do it in a mean way. We have been indoctrinated. But you will, if you just keep coming and just keep talking to us, we will wake up. We will wake up. So keep going, y'all. I got your back.
Netanyahu said in a book in the 1990s that if we don't see the threat of militant Islam, then pretty soon militant Islam will bring down the World Trade Center.
The next thing you'll see is the militant Islam is bringing down the World Trade Center.
Nice prediction there. Just a bit of psychic, was he? Like it's got Israeli fingerprints all over it. And with any of that sort of stuff, you just got to say, cui bono, who benefits? And the only people who benefited from 9/11 is Israel, and even Benjamin Netanyahu said that as well. So the one thing we are benefiting from at the moment is the attack on the World Trade Center.
Netanyahu said, quote, "We're benefiting from one thing, and that is the attack on the Twin Towers and Pentagon and the American struggle in Iraq."
I mean, they do these false flag attacks all the time. How much evidence do people need? And what would be the benefit for the Arab world blowing up Twin Towers? I mean, how have they benefited from this? Have a look at Iraq. Have a look at what we've done to the Arab world since that event happened. And look what Israel has got from that event happening, and ask yourself, who benefits?
The American government rounded up 200 Israeli operatives after 9/11, during their 9/11 sweep operation, and deported them back to Israel. The Israelis invented modern terrorism. They admit it. That's what they used to oust the British from Palestine and take over Israel in 1948, and they've been doing it ever since. But they learned early on to make it look like Arabs and Muslims did it rather than Jews.
You look at Larry Silverstein, who's a terrific owner in New York and a very good friend of mine who I just called. I was very worried about him because I assumed maybe he was in the building. He took possession of the building 1 week ago. As you know, he just bought the World Trade Center.
Right. Lo and behold, two Jewish billionaires buy two asbestos-filled buildings that are half empty, of which the Port Authority was attempting to get out from under the liability and debt associated with these worthless buildings. Two Jewish billionaires named Frank Lowy and Larry Silverstein buy these buildings, and the fact is, the literal, truthful, undeniable fact is that when they purchased the lease on the Twin Towers, they literally transferred billions of dollars of liability over to themselves, because the cost to extract the asbestos was in the billions.
In the 1990s, and I said that the West really doesn't understand militant Islam. So I wrote a book in 1995, and I said that if the West doesn't wake up to the suicidal nature of militant Islam, the next thing you'll see is the militant Islam is bringing down the World Trade Center.
That's suspicious. That's weird.
Democracies don't go to war easily. Sometimes they have to be bombed into going to war. The bombing of September 11th opened the eyes of Americans to see the great conflict and the great danger that faces us. And once opened, then the overpowering will of the majority of the people of the United States, of the steamroller, is inexorably moving to decide this battle. If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the...
Good morning, America. I'm Charles Gibson.
I'm Diane Sawyer, and it's Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center.
Holy fuck! Oh my God! Boom!
Oh man, what the fuck's going on?
Oh my goodness, there is smoke pouring out of the Pentagon. There has been another major explosion.
I'm going to interrupt you, Senator McCain. These are the first pictures we have in. This is from...
The bomb went off in the lobby first, then a plane hit the building. Then another plane hit the other building. But when I was coming through the doors on the other side of the Trade Center, either they blew the lobby up or something, because it blew the glass out of the doors and knocked us all down, and I got smoke and everything on me. I just feel a little shook up because I got blasted, so I'm just trying to, I want a drink of water. They don't have any water.
This is a terrorist attack. Jesus. In America? I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Can you even find the words for the people? I just got to just say for myself, just thank God I'm alive. And to come out to find out a terrorist, because I can't even be angry. It's senseless. And people died senseless. You mean tell me this building fell down senselessly? I don't know what to tell you. I don't know.
Plane actually impacted the building.
You know, it might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual site of the building that's crashed in, and as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around, which would indicate that the entire plane crashed into the side of the Pentagon and then caused the side to collapse. Now, even though if you look at the pictures of the Pentagon, you see that the floors have all collapsed, that didn't happen immediately. It wasn't until almost about 45 minutes later that the structure was weakened enough that all...
Down at the computer to actually turn the computer on. As soon as I pressed the button, boom. So at that particular time, based off what happened, I thought I had triggered a bomb. I was covered from my neck all the way down to my back in debris. My son was completely blown out of his stroller, and some of the floors had collapsed within, and people were trapped in between the floors. And I came out in what is believed to be the entrance or the place of initial impact. While I was coming out of the Pentagon, I didn't see any evidence of metal, airplane seats, luggage, nothing that would give me any indication that it was a plane that had hit the building. I did not have jet fuel over my body. My son didn't have jet fuel over his body. The people that I helped didn't have jet fuel on their body. So again, there was nothing on the inside that would give me any indication that there was a plane. In speaking with everyone, it was conclusive that no one else in the area where I was located had seen any parts of planes or luggage or baggage or anything of that nature. Yes, I believe it's something part of much more sinister. I mean, when you go out of your way to fabricate an official story, when obviously the evidence shows that the official story couldn't possibly be true, then yes, you should be brought to justice.
To some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
Okay, now, again, somebody told you that literally, like right before 9/11 happened, they said they couldn't track $2.3 trillion a day. Then a plane slams into the very part of the building where they were doing the accounting, blows up half the fucking building in the Pentagon, blows up a wall. That did not happen, but it did happen. Think about what you saw when you saw that Vice movie where Dick Cheney, who was the CEO of Halliburton, becomes a vice president and gets billions of dollars in no-bid contracts. Now think about what we just saw with Donald Rumsfeld saying they couldn't find $2.3 trillion.
But not ours, not fully, not yet. We are, as they say, tangled in our anchor chain. Our financial systems are decades old. According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
Did some research on plane crashes, as I'm sure many of your viewers have, and every single plane crash, especially a large aircraft, there's always wreckage left of the parts that can't be blown apart, the landing gear and the engines specifically, a lot of times the nose cone. Well, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, no wreckage whatsoever. The Pentagon, there were no engines, there were none of the landing gear, nothing.
And yet there were servicemen around that said, I've served in active military, it was a missile. I can tell you the sound of a missile. And they ignored all of this. And then we even pulled an old clip of a CNN journalist who was on the ground that day and said, I got up close, there's no plane. And they just kind of tried to wipe this from the internet.
Yeah.
And so we had to dig up this. I'm like, you had a CNN journalist who was just probably telling the truth. And it was like, I'm here, this is amazing. Like, I got up close, there's no plane.
Yeah.
And you just see this perfect hole. And then you have all these people who have been in active military zones who said, I heard a missile that day. They don't release, they classify images of the plane
videotape from the gas
until like 2000 and who knows when Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch was finally able, and you can't see anything.
Yeah.
It's like, what hit the Pentagon?
Officials have begun a major investigation into whether someone or many people benefited financially from the evil done to the country last Tuesday. Not long before the attacks occurred, there were some financial transactions in the stock market that may indicate knowledge of the attack before it began. ABC's Antonio Mora is here. Whether they ever get to, if they ever get to the bottom of it, it will be astonishing.
Astonishing, no question, Peter. What many Wall Street analysts believe is that the terrorists made bets that a number of stocks would see their prices fall. They did so by buying what are called puts. If you bet right, the rewards can be huge. The risks are also huge, unless, of course, you know something bad is going to happen to the company you're betting against.
This could very well be insider trading at the worst, most horrific, most evil use you've ever seen in your entire life.
One example, United Airlines. The Thursday before the attack, more than 2,000 contracts betting that the stock would go down were purchased. 90 times more in one day than in 3 weeks. When the markets reopened, United's stock dropped. The price of the contracts soared, and someone may have made a lot of money fast.
$180,000 turns into $2.4 million when that plane hits the World Trade Center.
It's almost the same story with American Airlines.
That's a 5-fold increase in the value of what was a $337,000 trade on Monday.
All of a sudden becomes what?
$1.8 million.
And there's much more, including an extraordinarily high number of bets against Morgan Stanley and Marsh & McLennan, two of the World Trade Center's biggest tenants.
Could this be a coincidence? This would be one of the most extraordinary coincidences in the history of mankind if it was a coincidence.
It is absolutely unprecedented to see cases of insider trading covering the entire world, from Japan to the United States and North America to Europe.
ABC News has now learned that the Chicago Board of Options Exchange launched their investigation into the unusual trading last week. That may have given them enough time to stop anyone from profiting from death here in the U.S. It may also give investigators, Peter, a hot trail that might lead them to the terror.
Did you have any damage, or did you know what's happened down there?
Well, it was an amazing phone call I made. 40 Wall Street actually was the second tallest building in downtown Manhattan, and it was actually, before the World Trade Center, was the tallest. And then when they built the World Trade Center, it became known as the second tallest, and now it's the tallest. And I just spoke to my people, and they said it's the most unbelievable sight. How could it possibly go through this deal? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall. Most buildings are built with the steel is on the inside around the elevator shaft. This one was built from the outside, which is the strongest structure you can have. And it was almost just like a can of soup.
You know, Donald, we were looking at pictures all morning long of that plane coming into building number 2, and when you see that approach the far side, and then all of a sudden, within a matter of a millisecond, the explosion pops out the other side.
Right. I just think that it was a plane with more than just fuel. I think, obviously, they were very big planes. They were going very rapidly, because I was also watching where the plane seemed to be not only going fast, it seemed to be coming down into the building. So it was getting the speed from going downhill, so to speak. It just seemed to me that to do that kind of destruction is even more than a big plane, because you're talking about taking out steel, the heaviest caliber steel that was used on a building. I mean, these buildings were rock solid. And, you know, it's just an amazing thing. This country is different today, and it's going to be different than it ever was for many years to come.
Very profound statement and very true.
Just a few moments ago, Donald Trump passed through here, so we had a minute to talk with him. Let's roll that tape. You can see what he had to say.
Well, I've never seen anything like it. I've seen 2 huge 110-story buildings that are reduced to rubble, thousands and thousands of lives. I just got to see something that I've never seen before. I have hundreds of men inside working right now, and we're bringing down another 125 in a little while, and they've never done work like this before. And they're hard-working people, but they've never seen anything like it, and they've never done work like this before. It's terrible.
Tell me what it's like at Ground Zero. Tell me about the workers that you saw and what they're doing there.
Well, not only is it devastation, but it's very dangerous, because every few minutes a whistle would go off and everybody would just run, because you have all the buildings around it. which are in such a weakened state that people just don't know. And so they just have to take off. And then they come back and they're working under 50-story buildings that you don't know if they're going to fall down. So it's a terrible thing for the workers, and it's a terrible thing for the world, really.
How have you spoken to any of your men? Do you know how they're reacting to this? Because emotionally, this must be so incredibly difficult.
Well, there are a lot of them, but they've never seen bodies like this. I mean, the bodies all over. The great thing is when they find somebody that's alive, like the 5 firemen that they just found a little while ago. So that's the great thing, and that's what they're all striving for. But generally speaking, that's not the case. That's not the case. So they are working very, very hard, but it's a very depressing situation for these folks.
As you walked around and as you saw the piles of rubble, there are thousands of families out there who are hoping that someone might be in a pocket somewhere, still alive, still breathing, waiting to be dug up. As you assessed that damage from your perspective, do you believe that's possible?
Well, I would certainly not want to be the one to say it's not possible. Certainly it's a tough situation, but you can't give up hope, because there's always hope. I mean, the 5 men, I'm sure their families thought that they probably were gone, and now they walk in the door. A couple of them walked away after they were dug out. So there probably are some more people in there, and therefore you can't give up hope.
You've had an impact on the skyline of New York. What is it like as you see it now?
It's like a whole different skyline. It's like a whole different city and world. I cannot believe the sight of Lower Manhattan without the World Trade Center, and therefore we have to rebuild, not necessarily in that form, but we have to rebuild at least as good and maybe better.
Just finally, can you tell me emotionally, as you walked around, we've heard some of the stories from the firemen. They're so exhausted and mentally and physically. What was it like for you personally to go in and see all of what you saw? Well, it was amazing to see it. It was a very depressing scene, but I'll tell you what, you really can take heart. These firemen and policemen and the construction workers equally, the courage they have is unbelievable. I mean, they're working, digging out and lifting up steel, and above them you have 55-story buildings that are very possibly going to be pouring down on them any minute, and they're working like nothing's wrong. I mean, they're amazing.
Now, it was, at the very least, incredibly suspicious during 9/11, shortly thereafter, when this segment ran, also back in 2002, on ABC News, as an update to a prior segment that they had done. Take a listen.
In the days after the September attacks, there were countless rumors about strange coincidences surrounding the events. One report about a group of Middle Eastern men spotted the morning of September 11th parked just across the river from New York City has not gone away. Investigation of their presence has led to questions about whether Israel was conducting espionage on U.S. soil. We're joined now by ABC's John Miller with an exclusive report this evening.
That's right, Elizabeth. This is a case that took the FBI and the CIA more than 2 months to sort out, while 5 Israelis waited in jail. It began when this woman was watching the Twin Towers burning from her apartment in New Jersey. She noticed 3 men on top of a van, posing for pictures with the towers burning in the background.
And I could see that they were like happy. You know, they didn't look shocked to me. You know, they didn't look shocked. I thought it was very strange.
The witness called police, who stopped the van hours later and arrested 5 men. All 5, it turns out, were Israeli. They were turned over to the FBI. Sources tell ABC News, during a check of national security databases, some of the men were listed as having had connections with Israeli intelligence. At the FBI, that set off alarm bells. The FBI needed the answers to 3 important questions. Who were these men? What brought them to that parking lot on the morning of September 11th? And did they have...
Amazingly enough, we have found the moving company where the 5 Israelis worked.
Was this building being used as a front for some kind of Israeli intelligence operation that possibly was doing surveillance on the Arab American community? Were there men celebrating or slapping 5s or whatever?
We had received an all-points bulletin, and I just happened to see the van and, hollered over to my lieutenant, I think that could be the van. We checked it out, and it was. We were all on edge, obviously, so I really wasn't looking to make friends with these people, and neither were the officers that I were with. Once we started talking to them, they were pretty much like, hey, we're not against you, we're with you.
And at that point, we were taken for another round of questioning, this time related to our allegedly being members of Mossad. The fact of the matter is, we are coming from a country that experiences terror daily. Our purpose was to document the event.
The 5 Israelis were detained for 10 weeks and finally deported on immigration violations after the FBI cleared them of any involvement in 9/11.
All right, guys, so nothing to see there. Obviously, you'd be a conspiracy theorist if you had any questions about that. You actually would be worse. You'd probably be anti-Semite if you had any questions about a foreign government overseas that had people who were attached to their intelligence apparatus who were celebrating and taking photos as the towers burned and American citizens were dying.
Section from last minute. Look at what they did to Julian Assange. I'll tell you guys in the 9/11 comments section from last week, you guys were dropping all sorts of tidbits, had me at the edge of my seat, and I began researching things I had never even heard of, and I am now completely shaken. So yeah, I showed you guys that video of the Israelis who were celebrating. It turned out that they had connections to the Israeli intelligence apparatus, and the FBI pretty much just let them go for whatever reason. Said, okay, we looked into it, no further follow-up. Then that sort of got memory hold. Memory hold is an expression where they basically never talk about it again, and then we all just forget that it ever happened, and we move on. Well, one of you guys commented and said that I should look into the Israelis that were working at the World Trade Center who were forewarned of the attack. And oh my God, yes, that is another thing, after I researched, that has been completely memory hold, but it is true. So I'm going to show you guys, by the way, because before they say I'm a conspiracy theorist, I had to make sure that I had all of the relevant documents, all the relevant links, and I'm going to include those links for you guys. So just check out the episode. You can look at the links yourself. Here is the very true story of what went down on 9/11. There was an instant messaging service that was called Odigo. Maybe I'm saying it wrong. Odigo, O-D-I-G-O. It was Israeli owned and operated, and they had headquarters that were based 2 blocks away from the World Trade Center. Now, this is according to Haaretz. I'm sure I'm not saying that right. You know, it's a very popular Israeli publication. Check out this headline from them, published September 26th, 2011. So that is 15 days after the attack. It says, Odigo workers were warned of the attacks. That is the headline. And I'm going to read you this piece of the article verbatim. It says, quote, Odigo, the instant messaging service, says that 2 of its workers received messages 2 hours before the Twin Towers attack on September 11th, predicting that the attack would happen. And the company has been cooperating with Israeli and American law enforcement, including the FBI, in trying to find the original sender of the message, predicting the attack, end quote. Seriously, you guys, what the F? And that's not all. That's not all. It's going to get even crazier. 2 weeks after 9/11, Alex Diamandis, and by the way, he was Odigo's vice president. This is the vice president of the company. Said that the messages said something big was going to happen in a certain amount of time. And it did, almost to the minute. So for whatever reason, the forewarned Odigo employees did not feel the need to pass that terror warning on to the authorities in New York, an act that would have saved thousands of lives. Here's a CNN report from September 28, 2001, further cementing that fact. It reads, quote, the FBI is looking into whether a warning sent to employees at an instant messaging company less than 2 hours before jetliners slammed into the World Trade Center was connected to the attacks, a company executive confirmed Friday. Alex Diamandis, vice president for sales and marketing with Odigo Incorporated, said there was nothing specifically about the attacks in the message, but he said it was suspicious in nature, especially because of its timing. Quote, I would describe it as a threat, a warning. Diamandis declined to comment further on the content of the message, citing the ongoing investigation. 2 employees at the Odigo office in Israel received the message at about 7 a.m. Eastern on September 11, 2021, he said. After the attacks, the staff decided to scour the server logs in order to determine the source of the message, Diamandis said. Information was then passed on to Israeli authorities, who in turn passed it to the FBI. The FBI did not confirm whether they had received any information from Odigo. So to give you guys reference, okay, he is saying they received a message at 7 o'clock a.m. Eastern. The first tower was struck at 8:46 a.m. Eastern. So they had an hour and 46 minutes to remove themselves from the premises because they knew that something bad was going to happen. And this information was given to the FBI, and we haven't heard of it since. Not even in the media. The media just dropped it. Totally not relevant at all that somebody on Israeli messaging service was saying, hey, there's about to be a big attack. Now, what do they always say about Israel? It's our greatest ally. It's our greatest ally had information that attack was about to take place on American soil. And rather than alerting American authorities, they decided to alert other Israeli citizens. Oh, there's more. On September 12, 2001, the Jerusalem Post, also based in Jerusalem, reported in a since-archived online publication that, quote, the foreign ministry in Jerusalem has so far received the names of 4,000 Israelis believed to have been in the areas of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon at the time of the attack, end quote. Okay, fine. And yet, despite this remarkably, and that's according to someone who was traveling with Bibi Netanyahu, only 4 Israeli citizens died that day. So the foreign ministry was looking for 4,000 of them. And fortunately, and I do mean that fortunately, because I wish nobody had died that day, only 4 of them actually did die. Here's that clip of Bibi Netanyahu and his wife, and you'll hear somebody off on the side confirming that only 4 Israeli citizens died that day.
This whole section that we see here, we're running all the way down to all Cantor Fitzgerald folks. And so there, how many Israelis? There's 4 Israelis altogether.
Okay, fine. Take from that what you will. But I'm going to tell you another strange, real, true fact. Larry Silverstein. And this one, oh my gosh, they call you anti-Semitic for knowing it. Larry Silverstein was a prominent New York State real estate developer. He's also a personal friend of Bibi Netanyahu. He is very connected to Israeli politics and Israeli politicians and other prime ministers. Well, Larry was quite lucky. He obtained the lease for the Twin Towers just 6 weeks prior to 9/11. 6 weeks prior. He obtained the lease, and he also took out an insurance policy, which fortunately included coverage for acts of terrorism. So when it came time to collect, when the towers went down, Silverstein claimed that there were 2 incidences of terror, since 2 buildings were hit by the planes, which allowed him to seek double indemnity. So to be clear, he collected $4.5 billion from insurance on the towers that he had invested in just 6 weeks prior to the 9/11 attacks. Now, I was so shocked looking at that I wanted to debunk that. I turned to Snopes, you guys. I said, Snopes, tell me why this is not true. And of course, Snopes had an article defending Larry Silverstein. And of course, they didn't really debunk it at all. They just write, and I'll include the link to this as well, that the implication of foreknowledge is unfounded, that of course getting insurance is normal. And he wasn't the only investor. He led the consortium of investors 6 weeks prior, but he wasn't the only investor. So nothing to see there. But by the way, Larry was even more lucky than that, unbelievably. Every morning, he used to have breakfast. He used to take breakfast meetings at the World Trade Center. But on the morning of 9/11, and by the way, this is according to Larry in interviews, he just broke his own routine. He, fortunately, on the morning of 9/11, had a dermatologist appointment. So he didn't take breakfast in the towers, and that spared his life. So what are we supposed to make of all of this, all of these facts, which again, I will include links? What are we supposed to make of all of these things that have been memory holed about 9/11? And since we have been in never-ending wars in the Middle East and many Americans have died, their sons, their daughters have died overseas fighting never-ending wars. Well, I'll tell you, for one hand, if we talk about it, we're We're instantly called conspiracy theorists. We're instantly called 9/11 truthers. We're instantly called anti-Semitic. And let me tell you, the only word for all of this, if you're not interested, if you don't find this to be remarkably suspicious, if you don't realize that we were not told everything about 9/11, the only word, the only adjective that should be launched on you is you're anti-American. And that's worst of all. I'd rather be called everything in the entire world than be called anti-American. And that's what these people in the media are. They're anti-American cowards. And you know what? I just won't play their game.
Why is it, do you think, that so many people in the Jewish community believe that you are anti-Semitic?
I think that's actually a very good question. And just to go back, I'm going to answer your question. I just want to make sure people are recognizing, because he said a lot of stuff there, he's not able to counter. He essentially tried to hold me to looking up the sources. We've now found the sources, and it's the BBC, it's the New York Times, and it is the Euromed Human Rights
We
Monitor.
have found no sources, and we'll fact check it afterward. You looked it up during the show. I'm sorry.
70,000 tons of bombs were dropped on Gaza, and per the BBC, the British aircraft dropped 4,000 tons of bombs on Dresden. So just for clarity,
in a single night, not 11 months. In a single night, correct.
Please don't cut me off. I have not cut you off. He called that a blood libel because that is a strategy, which is meant to just distract people from the truth or looking into it. So you say everything you say is a blood libel. Now, to answer your question, Piers, I think that's a very good question.
Now, I know what they do because I used to ask them to do it. I mean, when I was in the Mossad and we had a guy that gave us problems in the U.S., and he was speaking out, and he was talking like Pete talked once and said, Israel is bombing Lebanon with cluster bombs. We say, hey, who's that guy? You know? And of course the campaign starts, and before you know it, the guy's labeled. And he's an anti-Semite, because that's what we say he is.
It's a trick, we always use it. When from Europe somebody is criticizing Israel, then we bring up the Holocaust. When in this country people are criticizing Israel, then they are anti-Semitic.
I'm tired. I must tell you, I'm very tired. I'm tired. I am, and I'm allowed to. By the way, I'm human, and it's perfectly normal for someone to be tired, and I'm tired.
Arabs will not stay in the Gaza Strip. Who will stay? Jews. Africa is big. Canada is big. The world will absorb the people of Gaza. How we do it? We encourage it.
If they don't want to go.
No, they won't.
If they don't.
The Arabs want to go.
If they don't want to go.
They want to go.
If they don't, what happens?
The normal people don't want to live in hell.
What you're talking about sounds like a plan for ethnic cleansing.
You can call it ethnic cleansing, you call it refugees, whatever you want.
الإسرائيليين الآن يصنعون صواريخ مداها 4000 ميل لكي تصل تونس وتصل الجزائر. الإسرائيليين لا يقاتلون ضد الفلسطينيين فقط، يقاتلون ضد الأمة العربية. هذا قتال الوجود وليس قتال حدود. وهم ينتظرون اليوم الذي يحل فيه المشكل الفلسطيني لكي يتفرغوا للهجوم على بقية الشعوب العربية. الخندق الفلسطيني يقاوم نيابة عنكم. يجب دعمه وحشد كل الامكانيات وراء الخندق الفلسطيني، لان الخندق الفلسطيني هو الخط الامامي للدفاع عن الامه العربيه. اذا سقط هذا الخط ستتقدم القوات الاسرائيليه الى البلاد العربيه من محيط الخليج. يريدون اقامه امبراطوريه اسرائيليه فوق الارض العربيه.
It's not only secular, because the founders of Zionism and the people, the Zionists today, are not only secular. They basically, many of them, hate Judaism. They hate God and his religion. For example, I have a friend of mine who grew up in Zionist education, grew up in Jerusalem. And he told me that what he was taught is that we, the Jewish people, have two enemies. Now guess who the two are and who the first is. The first is the religious Jew, and the second is the Arab. But that movement, the movement of Zionism, who is secular and who refuses to follow Judaism, they misuse this very same religion they refuse to follow, and they misuse it to justify crimes which are forbidden in this very same religion, because killing and stealing, oppressing an entire people, all of this is forbidden in Judaism. And as I said before, the whole concept, the idea of Zionism to build a sovereign homeland for Jews is in total contrast of Judaism. Us, people in the free world, should say something. This is unjust. This is unjust for the people of Palestine that this voice is attempted to be silenced. But it's not only doing injustice for the Palestinian people. This is doing injustice for the Jewish people as well. Because when you conflate Judaism and Zionism, you conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, you're making a statement as if all Jews support all what's going on and as if all Jews are accountable to what's going on. But we always need to know better than that. And we try to educate people to understand that anti-Zionism has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, because Judaism and Zionism are not the same. Judaism is a religion. Zionism is a political movement. Should never be conflated. A lot of Jewish people in New York, many of them support Israel, but there's a massive community who is anti-Zionist. And people might not know because the mainstream media would never show you that. Like, for example, there was a couple of years ago, there was a huge mass anti-Zionist rally, a Jewish anti-Zionist rally in front of the Israeli consulate on 2nd Avenue, Manhattan. And then CBS would announce that there is a traffic jam on 2nd Avenue. And they would not say what the reason is. A number of my teachers were Holocaust survivors. And you know, they were telling stories, terrible stories. And unfortunately, we're hearing similar stories now. This is something that should... The Jewish history in the Holocaust should be a lesson for Jewish people, how to refuse this genocide taking place in Gaza.
If you look at the way that the word terrorist was carefully constructed after 9/11 to mean all Arab people are terrorists, essentially. Think about who benefits the most from that. It's not America, it's Israel.
Yep.
Because Israel's over there by all the Arab nations trying to fucking...
said that in his own words, that he benefited from this.
Exactly.
And he's the one that pushed into war in Iraq.
The most important thing, and I'll end with this, is that we have to have moral clarity. We have to say that anybody who engages in the deliberate attack on civilians, the deliberate attack on innocent civilians, which is what terrorism is, as opposed to the unintentional harm done to civilians in legitimate military actions against combatants. Anybody who engages in systemic, deliberate attack on civilians is beyond the pale, and any cause that uses terrorism to advance its purposes or that justifies terrorism is beyond the pale and will be dealt with accordingly. I want to thank you, and I want to thank you, Senators, for giving me this opportunity to speak here today and to speak with you in the coming session that we'll have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We should have never gone into the Middle East. We should have never gone into the Middle East. Under my leadership, we will turn the page forever on those foolish, stupid days of never-ending wars.
We're rebuilding our military stronger than ever before, and we are not going to deplete it again on stupid, senseless, endless wars. World War III has never been closer than it is right now. We need to clean house of all of the warmongers and America last globalists and the deep state. I am the president who delivers peace. I was the first president in decades who didn't start a war. And the worst, most incompetent, most corrupt president in history is going to drag us into World War III. And this horrible, horrible president is dragging us toward World War III. We're going to be in World War III soon. Because I think we would have been good with Iran. I don't want to do anything bad to Iran. Large sections of the Middle East. I mean, look at the death and destruction that's taken place. And none of this would have happened if I were president. Our opponents join with warmongers and neocons to wage endless wars, these wars that never end. Together we're fighting to secure our borders, end the endless foreign wars, and defend the working people of America. But the Muslim and Arab voters in Michigan and across the country want a stop to the endless wars and a return to peace in the Middle East. That's all they want. Speaking of World War III, I'll keep you out of World War III. What would happen if we had a war? We won't, with me, but you will have World War III, I believe, without me, but we won't have. I will be sure that World War III will not happen. I'm the only one can say it won't happen. But I stand here today, and I'm the only candidate who can make this promise. I will prevent, and very easily, World War III, very easily.
These are American neoconservatives. It's called A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm. And they wrote it for Netanyahu. And what it says is this. It says, Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah are the threat to Israel, particularly Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, backed by Iran and Syria. And what we want to do is we want to break that chain. And then, get this. They said to break that chain, what we want to do is we want to get rid of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. Huh? Saddam Hussein is the Sunni, the minority Sunni dictator sitting on a super majority Shiite population. And Iran and Hezbollah, of course, are these fundamentalist Shiite regimes. So why does it make sense to these neocons to get rid of Saddam Hussein? Well, it was this ridiculous Rube Goldberg scheme. Okay, the Rube Goldberg scheme was, if we get rid of Saddam Hussein, then we will get the cousin of the king of Jordan to take over Iraq. And because he's a Hashemite with the blood of the prophet in his veins, all the Shiites will just bend over and kiss his bottom and do whatever he says. Which, this is completely crazy. The Shiites don't revere the Hashemites at all. The Hashemites are Sunnis. And even though the Shiites revere the bloodline of the prophet, it's not like they're priests. And even priests and cardinals and bishops don't have like political control over their people directly. So, in other words, they were living in this fantasy world that the Shiites of Iraq would become compliant under the new pro-American installed and pro-Israeli installed regime. And then because Shiite Islam is born in Iraq and then spread into Iran, they would get the Shiite clergy in Najaf to order Hezbollah to stop being friends with Iran and start being friends with Israel. And Iraq, under these compliant Shiites, would then give the full advantage to America, Jordan, Turkey, and Israel, our friends in the region, against Iran. Well, Tim, this is the dumbest damn thing. This makes no sense at all. And people can read. It's called A Clean Break by Wormser. The follow-up is called Coping with Crumbling States. And if you really want to know, they wrote a book about it called Tyranny's Ally.
Who are the neocons? How would you describe them? What is a neocon?
A neocon is a group of true believers starting that really rose to force in the last years of Bush Sr. It was Cheney, Wolfowitz, Rumsfeld, but it became absolutely bipartisan. Victoria Nuland is kind of the ultimate.
Yes.
Her husband,
Bob Kagan.
Robert Kagan, is kind of the public intellectual of the neocons. I mean, he is.
I know Bob well. Yes. He's an idiot.
Yeah, well,
he's your public intellectual.
He's the guy that writes the tomes that
but he's
say,
a child.
I think that this has been just about the most disastrous foreign policy imaginable. How can you go from peace in 1991, when you have a chance for creating a peaceful, cooperative world that could actually be prosperous and do good things together, to this mess that we're in? It took a strategy so stupid, so reckless, so blind, and that's what the neocons gave us. They gave us a strategy which said, we now run the world. And explicitly, we will be the world's policemen. We will fight the wars that we need to fight whenever and wherever we need to fight them. We will make sure that there's never a rival. Well, you do that long enough, you end up in lots of absolutely destructive, stupid wars. And the rest of the world doesn't just sit back and say, oh, thank you, U.S., we're so grateful you're the leader. They say, come on, you're 4.1% of the world population. There's another 95.9% of the world population that actually would just like peace and some cooperation and not you to be telling us what to do. So this strategy was explicit, clear, adopted in the last years of basically in 1991-92, after the Soviet Union was dissolved in December 1991. Clinton is just not serious, consequent, or experienced enough. He wasn't a rigid neocon, but Madeleine Albright was a true believer, and Clinton drifted in that direction. And that's also partly something to understand, which is when you have the biggest military machine in the world, when you are so powerful, the war machine is always revving. There's always some case for war. The neocons basically said, yeah, we're the policemen, we're the constabulary. This is our duty. And said you have to be in each of these conflicts because U.S. reputation also depends on this. So they invited regional wars and everywhere and all the time, and believed, of course, we could clean out governments we didn't want, regime change by war, by covert operations, and so on. And it became not a little movement; it became the dominant drive. So Clinton kind of drifted. His administration was divided between Madeleine Albright and Holbrooke on one side and William Perry on the other side, but he went with Albright. By the end of Clinton's term was NATO enlargement, bombing of Belgrade, and we were kind of off to the races. Then came Bush Jr., 9/11, global war on terror, but basically 9/11 as the opportunity to implement the project for the new American century, which is the document that defines the neocon agenda. And it's such an interesting document because very clear, it was very carefully studied, and it's also important to understand the U.S. is a big ship, so it doesn't turn quick, so you prepare a path, or it's this stuck rudder, as I said. And you can read in Rebuilding America's Defenses, which was a kind of campaign document for the incoming Bush Jr. administration, what we should do. And it defines this neocon agenda. So Bush Jr. introduced all of these things, the unilateral withdrawal from ABM, the war in Iraq, the expansion of NATO to 7 more countries, the commitment to expand NATO to Ukraine and Georgia. Then comes Obama. You don't think of him as a neocon especially, but who becomes the point person for Eastern Europe and Ukraine, Victoria Nuland. So interesting. Victoria Nuland was the deputy national security advisor of Cheney.
I remember very well.
Yes. So she was Cheney's advisor. Then she was George W.'s ambassador to NATO during the commitment to enlargement. And if Obama weren't a neocon, you would say, well, that's not someone I'm going to hire. But all of a sudden she lands as Hillary's assistant. Now, Hillary's absolutely neocon to the core. And there's Victoria Nuland, and she goes from being Hillary's assistant to becoming Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs and becomes the point person in the overthrow of Yanukovych at the end of 2013 and early 2014. And Obama is he's also very inexperienced in obviously no experience at all in foreign policy, but he wasn't by nature a neocon, but the system keeps you moving unless you're a president that knows how to keep a foot on the brakes. And we haven't had many presidents like that. Eisenhower was one who knew how to put of his foot on the brakes because he really understood this system. John Kennedy learned it, but only after the Bay of Pigs, and probably was killed by our government for trying to keep his foot on the brakes. And there have not been many other occasions when presidents kept their foot on the brakes. So in 2011, Obama does the absolute neocon play of saying, almost out of the blue, by the way, why don't we overthrow Bashar al-Assad, Syria's president? Well, that's a little damn weird. But suddenly you start hearing Assad must go. I was on Morning Joe when that statement by Hillary was made, and Joe Scarborough looked at me and said, Jeff, what do you think? And I said, well, how are they going to do that? That sounds like another pretty stupid idea. And it turned out that was 2011. We've had 13 years of war in Syria, hundreds of thousands dead.
Destroyed the country.
Of course, destroyed the country. And who's president? Bashar al-Assad. And interestingly, I can tell you, oh, God. Yeah, I can tell you. In 2012, the U.S., there were protests, there were things that were going on in Syria, but the president said, okay, we'll send in the CIA to overthrow the government in Syria. And if anyone is wondering, we do this dozens of times, so don't have any illusion that this is unusual. It is the job, the terms of reference of the CIA to overthrow governments in other countries. I don't approve. I think it leads to war, destruction. It hasn't passed Putin's notice that that's the job of the CIA, so it's another reason he doesn't exactly want the U.S. on his border and so forth. Okay, so we start arming the jihadists, crazy things in Syria. Yeah, I can say it. I'm just thinking because... and the U.S. says Assad must go. So the UN starts a diplomatic process to try to find peace, which is the job of the UN. It's not to implement U.S. regime change. It's to try to find peace. So the UN succeeds in getting all of the parties to agree to a peace agreement, except one, the U.S. So the idea that you couldn't find peace, you couldn't find all these different factions in Syria. There was an agreement reached, but there was one obstacle to the agreement, and the obstacle was the U.S. said on the first day of this agreement, Assad must go, and the response was, why don't you have it a process? There'll be in 2 years an election or 3 years. Don't overthrow the government the first day. We have all this in place. And Obama, well, I don't know if it's Obama, probably Hillary, but whatever, said no. So that's why there was no agreement.
And joining us now is Ron Suskind. He's the author of the hot new book, The 1% Doctrine. Ron, thanks very much for coming in. Congratulations on the new book.
Hey, thanks, Paul.
What was the most eye-popping piece of information that you learned in the course of your reporting, researching this book?
The broadest part, the thing that covers the most, is this 1% doctrine. It explains everything. That's why it's the title of the book. Let's set the scene. It's 2 months after 9/11. The vice president is being given harrowing intelligence. Pakistani nuclear scientists have been sitting with bin Laden and Zawahiri right before 9/11. Tenet and the CIA brief him. NSC people are there. Cheney says something fascinating. He says, for these low probability, high impact type events, we need to think about them in a different way. Then as the briefing goes on, he stops the proceedings and says, here it is. If there's even a 1% chance that WMDs have been given to terrorists, we need to treat it as a certainty, not in our analysis, but in our response. Those two things are fascinating.
And that jumped out at you right away. Here's what you write on page 163. You write, a key feature of the Cheney doctrine was to quietly liberate action from such accepted standards of proof, and it was effective. Suspicion, both inside America and abroad, became the threshold for action. Understandable after 9/11, right?
It will be debated. The point is, here it is. Here's the real secret to the playbook. Talk it out. Is this what we want for America? We see both sides here. And the fact is, making suspicion the guiding principle of the world's most powerful nation creates enormous backlash. For instance, as somebody says, 99 innocent men are worth arresting so that one guilty man is captured, reversing the normal equation. All of the excesses essentially are justified under this principle. Yet, what other one is there? This is the debate that's the real debate about the war on terror, and of course
The 9/11 terrorist attacks left the US with national trauma and 2 decades of war. However, it also led to the biggest shuffle of federal bureaucracy in American history. With the government instituting the Department of Homeland Security and pumping a major portion of its budget into the defense sector, the 9/11 attacks served as a booster shot for players in the sector which had been languishing after the era of the Cold Wars. Defense contractors and arms manufacturers have been making windfall gains post the 9/11 attacks, and the trends have continued unabated even after 2 decades. Post the 9/11 attacks, the US government instituted the Department of Homeland Security to put together safety and security functions. It has since grown to become the 3rd largest cabinet department. American leaders have since used the attacks as justification to continue investing heavily in defense. The government's move to expand its defense budget saw defense company stocks make significant gains when the US stock market reopened after the attacks, and it continues to be on a roll since then. The 9/11 attacks shifted the focus from dealing with terror attacks to tracking the enemy and preventing such attacks. Big defense contractors like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon, which were previously focused on manufacturing weapons for war, adapted their marketing strategies and repackaged their products for use in domestic security. This ensured that these companies made soaring gains with a combined total revenue of $100 billion in 2001. It accounted for 1% of the United States' $10 trillion GDP. In 2020, Boeing alone reported a profit of $26 billion through defense sales. This trend was not limited to traditional military contractors. Smaller companies also began shelving local security proposals and developed new ones in an attempt to cash in on the hundreds of billions of dollars that the government was allocating for Homeland Security. Post 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security enabled anti-terror grants that even police departments across the US could tap into to purchase new military-grade equipment. Smaller defense companies thus took to supplying corps with military-like equipment. Thus, funds from the DHS ensured that even smaller companies ended up with huge profits. The US defense spending doubled after the 9/11 attacks, making up as much as 1/5 of the total national budget. The US spent $703.7 billion for defense in 2020. It has also increased its global share of arms exports to 37% during the last 5 years. This is 3 times more than China, which is the second largest spender at $209 billion. Experts have warned that defense companies are using the fear of the 9/11 attacks as a fuel to keep the money rolling in for them while producing more weapons than what is necessary. A federal report.
Did you know that the US has 750 military bases around the world? Now explore which country has the highest number of US military bases. In Panama, there are 11 US military bases, primarily because of the critical importance of the Panama Canal for global trade and security. Turkey hosts 13 bases, serving as a vital NATO ally and a strategic bridge between Europe and the Middle East. Portugal has 21 US bases, mainly in the Azores Islands, which play a key role in military operations across the Atlantic. The UK is home to 25 bases, a long-standing partner in military intelligence and operations throughout Europe. In Puerto Rico, there are 34 military bases positioned strategically in the Caribbean for naval and air force activities. Italy hosts 44 U.S. bases, thanks to its central location in Europe and its proximity to both the Middle East and Africa. On the island of Guam, the U.S. maintains 54 bases, making it an essential military outpost in the Pacific. South Korea is home to 73 U.S. bases, reflecting America's unwavering commitment to defend the nation against threats from North Korea. In Germany, the USA operates 119 bases, a legacy of World War II, with Germany being a central hub for U.S. military logistics in Europe. Finally, Japan hosts the highest number with 120 U.S. military bases, strategically placed to counterbalance China and North Korea, while also honoring post-World War II defense agreements.
Start with the military-industrial complex. Okay. What is it? Who is it? It is these massive defense corporations who make all these different weapon systems, from the smallest to the most powerful nuclear weapons and missiles. When we are at war, they make a lot of money. When politicians, even if we're not at war but are threatening that we may go to war, they make a lot of money. And these decisions are not made within the context of, hey, what does our military actually need? What do we need to ensure that our military is ready to defend our country and our national security interests? It is very often what members of Congress are advocating for, even more than the military is asking for sometimes, because of those cozy relationships with the military-industrial complex, with these massive defense contractors and their lobbyists. So there's a direct correlation as the money is changing hands there.
The amount of murder and mayhem that the United States is responsible for in the Middle East. Truly amazing. Virtually no successes and nothing but failures. And failures where huge numbers of people die. Countries are physically wrecked. Afghanistan, now the longest war in American history. I know not a single national security analyst who thinks there's any possibility we can win that war. And all we're doing is kicking the can down the road now so that Obama doesn't get blamed for losing Afghanistan, and now Trump doesn't get blamed for losing Afghanistan. Iraq, we wrecked that country. Syria, where the United States has played a very important role in trying to topple Assad that's hardly ever reported in the media. That's a total disaster. The amount of murder and mayhem we've created in Syria. And Libya, we did a great job there, right? With the help of the Europeans. My God, right? The Bush Doctrine in the greater Middle East, an abject failure.
After 9/11, a small group of individuals hijacked United States policy to overthrow the governments of 7 countries in the Middle East and Africa. Take a listen to this, and then I'm going to show you some maps.
It came back to me. A 1991 meeting I had with Paul Wolfowitz. You know, in 2001, he was Deputy Secretary of Defense, but in 1991, he was the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. It's the number 3 position in the Pentagon. And I had gone to see him when I was a 1-star general. I was commanding the National Training Center. Scooter Libby came to the door. I met Scooter for the first time, and he brought me in. And I said to Paul, I said, and this is 1991, I said, Mr. Secretary, you must be pretty happy with the performance of the troops in Desert Storm. And he said, well, yeah, he said, but not really. He said, because the truth is we should have gotten rid of Saddam Hussein, and we didn't. And this was just after the Shia uprising in March of '91, which we had provoked, and then we kept our troops on the sidelines and didn't intervene. And he said, but one thing we did learn, he said, we learned that we can use our military in the region, in the Middle East, and the Soviets won't stop us. He said, and we've got about 5 or 10 years to clean up those old Soviet client regimes, Syria, Iran, Iraq, before the next great superpower comes on to challenge us. And it was like, you know, I'm coming out of the Mojave Desert. I've been training troops. I haven't been thinking geostrategy for some time. And suddenly a guy just sort of shoves this nugget at you. Well, you remember it. It was a pretty stunning thing. You mean the purpose of the military is to start wars and change governments? It's not to sort of deter conflict? We're going to invade countries? And, you know, my mind was spinning. And I put that aside. It was like a nugget that you hold on to. This country was taken over by a group of people with a policy coup. Wolfowitz and Cheney and Rumsfeld, and you could name a half-dozen other collaborators from the Project for a New American Century. They wanted us to destabilize the Middle East, turn it upside down, make it under our control. It went back to those comments in 1991. Now, did anybody ever tell you that? Was there a national dialogue on this? Did senators and congressmen stand up and denounce this plan? Was there a full-fledged American debate on it? Absolutely not. And there still isn't. And that's why we're failing in Iraq. Because Iran and Syria know about the plan. All you have to do is read the Weekly Standard and listen to Bill Kristol, and he blabbermouths it all over the world. Richard Pearl the same way. They could hardly wait to finish Iraq so they could move into Syria. It was like a laydown. Oh, our legions are going to go in there. This wasn't what the American people voted George Bush into office. Well, they didn't actually vote him into office, but it wasn't what many of the people who... It wasn't what he campaigned on. He campaigned on a humble foreign policy, the most arrogant foreign policy in American history. He campaigned on no peacekeeping, no nation building, and here he is with Afghanistan and Iraq. It's astonishing.
For context, there was an Israeli spy in the Pentagon in the early 2000s sending information to Israel through AIPAC executives. I've made a whole video on this. You can watch it by clicking my playlist. Anyway, here's a map prior to 2001. Israel is shown in blue. All countries that posed a threat to Israel are shown in red. All countries that did not pose a threat to Israel are shown in green. This is a map today, with the dark gray being countries that the United States has toppled the governments of or assisted in toppling the governments of. The only countries in that report that the United States has not yet toppled over are Lebanon and Iran. And based on current events, I bet you can predict where things are headed.
When Wesley Clark, the general who headed NATO, went to the Pentagon just after 9/11, and famously he was showed a piece of paper that said we're going to have 7 wars in 5 years, and he was completely dumbfounded. He said, "What does this have to do with anything?" And he was told that the neocons and the Israelis are going to remake the Middle East.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq? Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made a decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, And by that time, we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today. And he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
If you take out Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. And I think that people sitting right next door in Iran, young people, and many others will say, the time of such regimes, of such despots, is gone. There is a new age, something new is happening.
And that is speculation on your part, or you have some evidence to that effect?
You know, I was asked the same question in 1986. I had written a book in which I had said that the way to deal with terrorist regimes, well, with terror, was to deal with the terrorist regimes. And the way to deal with the terrorist regimes, among other things, was to apply military force against them.
The way we did in Afghanistan.
The way, for example, I want to answer your question.
Well, I guess I'm running out of time, so I quickly was trying to get there. We've done, I think, what you proposed in Afghanistan, yet I haven't seen that sort of neighborhood effect.
Well, I think there's been an enormous effect. The effect was, we were told that there would be a contrary effect. First of all, people said that there would be tens of thousands of people streaming into Afghanistan, zealots who would be outraged by America's action, and this would produce a counter-reaction in the Arab world.
But I think you're not saying that when you take an action like we did in Afghanistan, we're going to see all the other countries just fold.
No, what we saw is something else. First of all, we saw everybody streaming out of Afghanistan. The second thing we saw is all the Arab countries and many Muslim countries trying to side with America, trying to be okay with America. The application of power is the most important thing in winning the war on terrorism. If I had to say, what are the 3 principles of winning the war on terror? It's like, what are the 3 principles of real estate, the 3 L's, location, location, location? The 3 principles of winning the war on terror are the 3 W's, winning, winning, and winning. The more victories you amass, the easier the next victory becomes. The first victory in Afghanistan makes the second victory in Iraq that much easier. The second victory in Iraq will make the third victory that much easier too, but it may change the nature of achieving that victory. It may be possible to have implosions taking place. I don't guarantee it, Mr. Turney, but I think it makes it more likely.
In 2008, in an interview with Wolf Blitzer talking about President George W. Bush's conduct of the war, you said you were surprised that Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi didn't try to impeach him. You said, quote, which personally I think would have been a wonderful thing, close quote. When you were asked what you meant by that, you said, for the war. For the war. He lied. He got us into the war with lies. Do you still believe President Bush should have been impeached?
First of all, I have to say, as a businessman, I get along with everybody. I have business all over the world. I know so many of the people in the audience. And by the way, I'm a self-funder. I have my wife and I have my son. That's all I have. I don't have this. So let me just tell you, I get along with everybody, which is my obligation to my company, to myself, etc. Obviously, the war in Iraq was a big, fat mistake, all right? Now, you can take it any way. It was a mistake. The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake. So George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it? You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied. Okay. They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. Governor Bush.
Just like Israel could not fight one day without the United States, and that's literally true, I'm sorry to say. Hezbollah and Hamas could not fight a day without Iran and other support. This costs money. This is big weapons. This is a political issue. This is not a terrorist issue. Netanyahu's absolute devastating mistake, which he writes about in 1996 in his book Fighting Terrorism, It's the whole explanation of why he's so messed up in his head. He says, because we have Hamas and Hezbollah, and they are supported by Syria, by Iraq, by Iran, by Sudan, by Libya, we have to overthrow all the governments that support these. I'm not making this up. This is in print. Then he explains it to the U.S. Congress in 2000. He explains this. I know this because I study this for a living. He explains this to the American Congress. You overthrow Saddam, it'll be beautiful. Look what'll happen in Iran next door. The plan was 7 wars in 5 years. This is all well documented. The problem is not Hamas and Hezbollah. Why? Because if you make an agreement with Iran, if you make an agreement with the Arab countries, they will be disarmed and dismembered as part of the agreement. This is so obvious. This is an excuse. This is not a reality. This is an excuse of Netanyahu, who has been the biggest disaster in Israel's history by far.
And the fact is that the war on terrorism cost the American taxpayer $8 trillion. It destabilized our country. It has led to the worst tribal, political, cultural, and racial divides of my lifetime. It slaughtered around, I think the estimates are around 4 million people were killed in the wars. It destroyed Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Yemen. It has resulted in thousands of our brave young soldiers being killed in action. Tens of thousands of them have been injured in action. Tens of thousands of them have committed suicide in the wake of the wars. And there's not one theater in where all of these wars have happened that you could say is better off now than it was before. That's their legacy. And you might notice none of them have a response to that. Not a single one of them. But when I said it to Douglas Murray, he said, okay, that is a fair point. He's got no response to that. And that's why they rely on smearing anybody who opposes them, because forget all the other stuff. This was your track record. You were for these policies. These policies were enacted. This is the result. And part of the result is now the term neocon means evil, psychotic, retarded, blood-soaked monster warhawk who ruins everything he touches. Deal with it. We're not going to stop calling you that.
It was the other N word in the 2000s, and it's interesting that it's come back again now. And now, just as then, people didn't really understand what it meant.
You wrote a book in the mid-2000s, Neoconservatism, Why We Need It. A period at the Henry Jackson Society, there was a sense that you were a neocon, and that's always discussed. I've actually seen in some of the responses to your Joe Rogan appearance, even just a few days ago, it's the same thing. He's a neocon. He's there to push the neocon agenda. How do you now think about that? Are you a neocon?
I don't think in the sense that people understand it, no. I mean, my book on it was mainly an explanation of what the neoconservative movement had been, and I wrote it in part because it was the other N word in the 2000s, and it's interesting that it's come back again now. And now, just as then, people didn't really understand what it meant. It increasingly became, and I think it's become, a sort of an unsalvageable term, because what it came to mean was simply war hawks. Principally, it was used as a kind of Jewish war hawks thing. The best definition of neoconservatism was given by Irving Kristol. Irving famously described a neoconservative as a liberal who'd been mugged by reality. I remember Irving once said to me, did you spend any time on the political left, Douglas, like we did? And I said possibly, but it was a matter of minutes. Neoconservatism in the 2000s was, I think, it was my friend Peter Thiel who first made this observation, was sort of one of the few intellectually coherent ways in which a sense of reasonable, responsible pride in our own achievements and in our own society could be defended intellectually.
So you don't disavow it, you don't reject label?
I reject it only because once a term becomes so polluted that everybody thinks it means something it doesn't, there's no point much in using it. I describe myself as a small c conservative without any neo in front of it, but if anyone wants to shove the neo in front, they will.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
على عهدي على ديني على أرض تلاقيني أنا لأهلي أنا فديهم أنا دمي فلسطيني 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 أنا دمي فلسطيني.
Than before war.
We are not humans. We do not have feelings. We have nothing. I want to become a good doctor in the future, but my dreams remain dream.
Whenever we go out, we have to go out with a man.
Afghans, women today is not the same as they were 20 years ago.
Can you imagine? We can't talk outside. We even can't talk loudly inside our home. Because if our neighbors hear our voices, it's a very big sin.
Today, Afghanistan is the only country on the planet Earth where women and girls are banned from education right. We women are being punished and imprisoned only because of our gender.
I'm an Afghan girl who's a victim of Taliban's government. After the ban, everything changed.
I am house arrest. My husband was killed by Taliban. In Afghanistan, Cold War is continue. Please save Afghan women.
Can your minds really accept all these things? Can you really imagine yourselves in this situation? Between these rules, between these people?
Americans don't know anything. We know after 9/11, I think about it now, the propaganda to make me afraid of Muslims. I can't even imagine being a Muslim growing up after 9/11 in America because I know how I felt about them. And I was young, I was 11 years old. But that beating every day in our heads that every Muslim was a terrorist was the idea that you got.
I make jokes about it, but like, you don't understand. Like, I had to shave my face to go to the airports. My mom would make me shave my face.
Yeah.
Like, at school, like, I was so young. This is actually funny. I had a mustache in, like, the 4th grade, and my mom made me nair it. Because she was like, you got to, like, because it was really, really bad. Because whatever like, the household would say, the kids have no filter. So they would just say whatever they wanted to me. But at a young age, I realized that I myself as a Middle Eastern was racist too. I was like, oh, it's not us, it's them. And so I would point my finger out of fear and be like, no, they did it. But then I went to Saudi Arabia, and I don't think I've ever been to a country that was more hospitable to me. The love that I got, the respect that I got, I literally sat back and I hung myself out to dry on a podcast. I go, wow, I was brainwashed. I was so scared. I didn't bring her.
Yeah, same. And so first I want to say, just like, to all Muslims growing up during that time in America, I am sorry on behalf of America
I'm sorry
for the way
too.
that you were treated. That it is so unacceptable. When I go back and I re-examine that propaganda, that brainwashing that took place in the classroom to make me scared of something I didn't even know what a Muslim was. I remember going to the airport and someone was a Hindu. And I was scared of it. I'm like, oh my God, they're going to make him take this off of his head, blah, blah. I thought that was a Muslim, right? There was no education about anything. And the reason for that, he who controls the textbooks controls the entire country, in my view, right? It was because everything that we did responding to 9/11 should be assessed as whether or not they were crimes against humanity. We bombed 1 million Iraqi civilians. We killed 1 million Iraqi civilians. What were we doing in Iraq? The Saudis were on the plane. They just said there's weapons of mass destruction, and then they never found them. But in the process, they killed 1 million Iraqi civilians, right? And it made us think it's okay to just keep bombing Muslims. That was the purpose, to me, of that educational propaganda and brainwashing, is that we feel nothing for Muslims if they die. And that's so wrong. As a Christian, it bothers me. As a Christian, it bothers me that I allowed the school system to inform my perspectives, to not care about human beings.
Yeah. There was that's so powerful. That I just want to take a second to say I absolutely agree with you. That is very powerful.
Hi, I'm Gideon Yeager with MTV News. An unfortunate racist backlash has already begun to rear its ugly head in the wake of Tuesday's terrorist attacks. A flurry of threats, vandalism, and outright violence has hit this country's Arab and Muslim American communities. One man has already been arrested for allegedly trying to set fire to a Seattle mosque, which escaped damage, while another mosque was firebombed in Denton, Texas this week. With Saudi terrorist Osama bin Laden the prime suspect behind Tuesday's brutality, many Arab and Muslim American communities have become increasingly worried just how far this backlash will go as events continue to unfold. On Thursday, I had an opportunity to talk to Arab and Muslim American students in New York to get their perspectives on this senseless tragedy. Have you ever experienced discrimination as a Muslim American?
I guess just now it's kind of really sinking in. I've actually kind of felt uncomfortable, walking around, going to any sort of, Muslim event or like something associated with the Muslim Student Association or anything like that. There's kind of a tension that, because you consider yourself American, and then now that there's this clear kind of divide between us and them, all over the media, all over the the papers, everyone's talking about it. Now you feel kind of uncomfortable, and will I or can I be considered, still be accepted as an American, or am I like the other, the them?
I think that the first thing is that when anyone hears the word terrorism, they automatically pin terrorism is equal to Islam, which is equal to Muslims, which is equal to all Muslims.
I think they think a lot of times that we're terrorists, or that even more than that, what's more dangerous, that we're unthinking people, that we're fanatical, or that we have some kind of secret alliance against them or something. A lot of just mistrust and suspicion.
I'm just afraid that there will be a bigger backlash than what we've already seen.
I don't feel too much, that I will be singled out or anything like that, but I guess an easier target might be, Muslim girls, especially the ones that wear scarves.
The day of the event, I was coming from a vigil. I was coming back to campus, and I was crossing the street, and a man harassed me. He, cursed at me. He was shouting at me. So, because of this event, yes, I've experienced that racism.
A lot of people are kind of really concerned and scared right now. Like my mom, she doesn't want to go out to a grocery store or anything because people at home have already been harassed. So, but I'm just hoping that most people understand that, we're not involved with this. We're just like everyone else. There were Muslims in the World Trade Center that got killed too. So we're all a part of this, and so there's no you versus me thing.
There's been so many references in the media and all over the place about Pearl Harbor, and you just immediately think to yourself, oh great, so what happened to the Japanese then is going to happen to Muslims or Arabs now.
I know when Oklahoma City happened, there wasn't even any Muslim involved, but there were incidents where people were harassed in mosques, where people came to mosques to try to cause some trouble.
Why shouldn't people jump to conclusions?
I mean, the people who did this are obviously, almost you could say insane, I guess. And what they're doing, if they are doing it in the name of Islam, is not wholly representative of Muslims or Islam at all.
Even if it is a Muslim or an Arab, there's more than 1 billion Muslims worldwide. If like 10 guys did it, that doesn't say anything about the whole community. Just like if it happens to be an American, it doesn't mean all Americans are so angry and want to blow up the World Trade Center.
What have you and your friends in the Muslim and Arab American community been saying about this?
Well, the first reaction, just like everyone else, is just complete shock and complete horror. And then, I guess the second reaction is that we, as Muslims, and we should get together and go help out. We should go give blood. We should go to the downtown, or if we can, and go volunteer and help anyone we can, because that's, I guess, because we want to, number one. Number two, it does let people see that we're not with them, quote unquote. We do want to help out, and we are Americans.
American legend and Muslim Muhammad Ali sent a message to MTV News saying, quote, "If the culprits are Muslim, they've twisted the teachings of Islam. Whoever performed or is behind the terrorist attacks in the United States of America does not represent Islam. God is not behind assassins. If you feel you're being targeted because of your heritage or religion, log on to fightforyourrights.mtv.com. And for continuing coverage of the terrorist attack on Tuesday and how it's affecting young people across the country, or to share your feelings about this catastrophe, please log on to mtvnews.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How's everybody doing tonight?
The U.S.-led war on terrorism is getting at least verbal support from some among a one-time adversary, Iran. In Tehran this week, demonstrators held a candlelight vigil for victims of the attacks in New York and Washington, and Iran's foreign minister was quoted today as saying his government wants those behind the attacks, quote, tracked down and severely punished.
Terrible tragedy for our country. Now, one of the biggest blowback effects that I saw after 9/11 was the amount of racism that Middle Easterns, Indians, anybody who just looked vaguely somewhat from that region of the world went through. You know, I remember as a child going to the airport before 9/11 and after 9/11. And I remember right after 9/11, about a few months after, I went to Disneyland. When I was in the airport, there was this Middle Eastern guy there. He had a little turban, et cetera, et cetera. I couldn't tell you which country he was from. And I remember as an 11-year-old looking at that man and just like, I stared at him the whole time. He probably looked at me and was like, why the fuck this creepy ass black kid staring at me? And I remember just looking at him like, oh my God, is he going to bomb us? Is he a terrorist? Is he going to destroy us all? Oh my God, is he part of Al-Qaeda, that shit George Bush was talking about? There has never, to me, been a sufficient enough conversation about the amount of racism, the attacks, the murders, those rapes, that the bullying, just in anything that Middle Easterns, even Indians went through because of the fear mongering that we had in this country after 9/11. I remember, after 9/11, that was the first time I started listening to AM radio. And let me tell you, say what you want about George Bush Jr., but that motherfucker can put the fear of God in you. We got weapons of mass destruction, people. Weapons of mass destruction. I used to come home from school listening to that shit like, oh my God, bro, they gonna kill us. They really hate us. They hate America. They hate our freedom, bro. And it was like, it just was such, one friend I was talking to about a few days ago, he was like, we thought it was righteous anger. We thought it was righteous anger, but it was misplaced hate. It was misplaced hate. And it was wrong, because reality is, you find out when you go to the Middle East, the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, they hate them motherfuckers out there just like we hate them here. They have support out there. They do have a lot of support, but reality is, there's people out there that hate them just like how we hate them. Boko Haram in Nigeria, hey, listen, they're Nigerian, yes, but most Nigerians don't like them motherfuckers. They ain't cool with that shit, kidnapping villages and raping women and shit. They not cool with that. So, it's, yeah.
Now, let's not let the propaganda do what it did to America in 2001 when the 9/11 attack happened, and then now every single person who wears a hijab is a suspect. Let's not do that, because that's the type of propaganda they're trying to create here in America. Just because someone is wearing a hijab does not mean that they need to be harassed. Just because they have a different religious background does not mean they need to be harassed. I saw a video where a girl in New York was walking, and her sister or her friend had on a hijab, and then there was an American girl who steps out of her way to bump into the girl wearing the hijab. And it's just kind of like, what are you doing? Like, this is ridiculous. And it's weird because I was like 4 years old when 9/11 happened. But I can distinctly remember from that time in elementary school and then in grade school, like people would like say weird things about like terrorists and bombs and all these different things. And they would make fun of the kids. And I never really understood it because you're just young at that point. But then you grow up and you're just like, wow, this is the way American society is. So don't treat anyone different because they wear a hijab because of what's going on in the Middle East. I understand tensions are high and things of that nature. But just because somebody's walking around wearing a hijab does not mean that they need to be harassed. Don't let the racist propaganda and fear-mongering get you to look at these people differently or to be afraid of them, because they're not. They're just people who have a religion and they respect their religion, so they wear what they have to wear. That's just FYI, because I know what the narrative is that they're trying to push here in America. Don't let them push that narrative on you. We already have a lot of divide in America. Don't allow this to be another divide. We have so much racism here, and it's not just black on white. It's a lot of different racism in different areas. So that's something that we need to work on, okay? Also, not everyone who wears a hijab or is Muslim is a terrorist. Like, that is a crazy statement. Also, people in America call it a Christian nation, and no one acts like a Christian. No one treats anybody else like a Christian. It's so weird that these same people attend church, raise their hands, and then after that, it's just kind of, I don't know, bro. It's just so strange.
Which I wish people asked Muslims, how did 9/11 impact you? You know, as a young, Muslim at the time, I didn't have kids. I was in my 20s. And I had just moved to the US. Having gone through that post 9/11 resentment towards Muslims has changed me, and I'm pretty sure a whole generation of Muslims in ways that we can't even describe. So thank you for asking. I do wish Saira could talk more about how it impacted her as an individual outside her family dynamic, and how Shakil's work impacted how she saw herself.
After September 11, I was added to the Muslim watch list and I had to leave America.
You yourself personally?
I'm not a Muslim, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I was born in a Muslim country. And after September 11, things got a little bit crazy. And so this watch list was created, and 72,000 men who had passports from Muslim countries were added to this watch list. And what it meant is we couldn't use certain airports. We needed to go for a 2-hour interrogation before boarding a plane, 2-hour interrogation after coming off a plane. But worst of all was this. I was living in New York at that time, and every 4 weeks, I had to line up every 4 weeks for 5 to 6 hours in a long line going around the block at the immigration center in New York just to show up there and show them my passport, my ID, and my credit card so they could see if I was, I don't know, I guess buying fertilizer or something.
No.
I loved America, but I felt so jaded by it. Me and my then girlfriend, Christina, who was from Estonia, we decided to move back to Malaysia.
What? You had to report to the US government every 4 weeks, all your purchases.
Right.
How is it you're not making videos about this? This is an amazing Nas Daily video.
There is no military solution to this. We are literally living, walking proof of that. I know firsthand of our failure to find a military solution to it. One of the points we've been making as an organization is to draw the parallels between what happened in the United States after 9/11 and what is happening in Palestine today. I remember very clearly after 9/11, there was virtually no introspection. No one was asking what could possibly drive someone to do something so terrible and destructive to us. Everyone just accepted this very simple and frankly racist narrative that these people are just evil. They're raised to hate us. They hate us for our freedom. You know, this eternal battle of good and evil in the world, and we need to go wage a forever war against them. And this is what I've been hearing from every congressional office I've interfaced with about how Israel has a right to defend itself and Hamas must be rooted out, while we're telling them there is no military solution to this. It's as though the entire country just wants to wipe the last 20 years of war from their collective memory. The American people need to finally get serious and ask what actually breeds this kind of resistance and demand an end to U.S. military aid to Israel, an end to the blockade, an end to the siege, a ceasefire now, and freedom for the Palestinian people.
Today it's Tel Aviv, tomorrow it's New York. I understand America first. I don't understand America dead. This is a time for a war for a common future.
You know, the United States, these elites that define the establishment are warmongers. They are desperate for conflict. They need conflict to continue to feed this military-industrial congressional complex where money gets poured into the defense industry, who pours out weapons that needs to be expended in wars so that this cycle of, monetized violence continues. And it's time for MAGA, to be honest here, to step up your game. You know, You voted for this guy, this president, because he said he was going to avoid wars. Yes, we dropped bombs on Iran. Let's not make that mistake again. Let's find a path towards peace. Did you not listen to Tucker Carlson's interview with the Iranian president? There does not need to be a war with Iran. This is part of the pro-Israeli greater Israel fantasy that's being sold to the American people. But, MAGA is make America great again, not make Israel great again. And we need to remember that there is a separation between these two, that just because it's good for Israel doesn't mean it's good for America. And oftentimes, if it's good for Israel, it definitely means it's bad for America.
Why does any person support Israel today? Okay, I think the answer is you support Israel for one of two reasons. The first being Holocaust guilt. Holocaust guilt. We were just baptized in this pseudo-religion of Holocaust guilt. It had nothing to do with us, but they made sure that systematically we learned this at school, right? We had to learn about the Holocaust, even though it is a fact that Henry Kagoda was way more of a psychopath, that he killed more Christians. This was happening at the exact same time, okay? What the Soviets and the Bolsheviks were doing, all happening in the same time period. We don't learn about that because that's not what's being reflected in the movies in Hollywood. It's all about the Holocaust. So you grew up, and when your brain was being developed, because this is Soviet education, they understand that it has to happen when you're young and your brain is being developed. You were taught that no matter what, effectively, Jews can do no wrong. And if you notice a Jewish person doing something wrong, then you are essentially guilty of maybe creating the next Holocaust. Case in point, tell a joke, call him Rabbi Portnoy. Well, that's it. Didn't you see Life is Beautiful? How could you call him Rabbi Portnoy? Don't you understand what your rhetoric is causing when you say Rabbi Portnoy? Yeah, you gotta educate yourself. That's number one reason I think that most people feel guilt. And what's crazy about that is we had nothing to do with it. A, B, there were worse things that were happening, and C, we're not even allowed to speak about the Holocaust. Imagine being so powerful. You execute this training for every child growing up in America, and it's coming more. They just passed another, I believe, in Congress. They passed, and you can fact check this, Skylar, but they passed a bill that every student in America would also have to learn about October 7th. It didn't happen on our soil, but every student is gonna have to learn about October 7th. This is part of that indoctrination that's taking place, okay? So you have been in
Ohio. I had this totally conflicted, agonized audience. They were completely unaware of the many millions of dollars that are being spent on Israeli Hasbara and the aggressive control of Israel messaging. And one woman got up and she said, we could have this open conversation anywhere in the United States, but in Arab countries, we would be censored, arrested, and sold into sex slavery. I pointed out that actually I cannot have this conversation anywhere in the United States. In fact, I can't have this conversation in most temples, hillels, and Jewish community centers. She then pointed out that the poster for my talk was very offensive because it had the word conflict in it and a picture of the separation wall. So she said, it says what side you're on. The most disturbing point in this very interesting public library came at the end when a little old lady comes up to the poor woman who's selling my books and announced in a very loud voice that my book should be burned, at which point a gentleman standing behind her said, that's what they did in Nazi Germany. If we look at the issue of framing and language, the framing is the Jews are good, the Arabs are bad, and you think about the visuals. In our newspapers, there's a tendency towards the sympathetic Jewish settler mother crying over her injured child, and the young man wrapped in a keffiyeh throwing a rock. That's the two visuals you see. And so there's an emotional message in our media that rarely portrays Palestinians as fellow human beings who may actually have some incredibly legitimate grievances and who actually are rarely violent. So Palestinians are never seen as the most educated group in the Arab world, they're never seen as the people with a long tradition of nonviolent resistance. You just don't see that. And so the question is, why is history that? Because history in our world is really a creation of groupthink. And if you go back in history, for decades, Palestinian history, trauma, aspirations, rights have been really invisible in Western discourse. And in 1974, the Anti-Defamation League officially defined what they called the new anti-Semitism as criticism of Israel. And 10 years later, AIPAC issued this college guide exposing the, quote, anti-Israel campaign on campus, which they still think is going on, and basically was trying to tell students why they shouldn't listen to people who are critical of Israel because they're all obviously foreign terrorists and anti-Semitic. And you may not know that the New York City Police Department now has a branch in Tel Aviv. So we now have our police emulating the Israeli Defense Forces. We have academics being monitored and attacked. We have university donors pressuring administrators. We have groups sympathetic to Palestinians being confronted with lies. And I suggest you Google Hamas on campus. It's a really interesting YouTube. And then people are emotionally blacklisted and, called anti-Semitic.
Just to show you some pictures at the foot of New York City. This is at the World Trade Center. Obviously a major fire there, and there has been some sort of explosion. We don't fully know the details. There is one report, as of yet unconfirmed, that a plane has hit of the World Trade Center, and you can see that there is smoke there coming out of at least two sides of the building.
stories down, and this appears to have occurred. This occurred about 2/3 of the way up. New York firefighters have a reputation of staying until the very end, and if there are civilians in that building which need to be rescued, and clearly there are, then there's no way the emergency services, I can imagine, are going to pull out of this.
That looks like a second plane.
Plane go in. That just exploded.
I just saw another plane coming in from the side.
You did. That was out of
Yes, and that's the second explosion. You could see the plane. So this looks like it is some sort of a concerted effort to attack the World Trade Center that is underway in downtown New York.
This is the Pentagon we're looking at now, according to my monitor. Again, it is hard to grasp what part of the building. We do not know if they're in the courtyard or outside, but you can see that a fairly considerable amount of damage has been done. We do not know whether these are offices or storage areas. The Pentagon is full.
United Airlines flight number 93. This was another Boeing 757, left Newark at 8:01 this morning en route to San Francisco. 38 passengers, 2 pilots, 5 flight attendants. It went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, which is near Johnstown, which is just southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I believe we have some video of that crash site right there, and that's where this flight went down. We are waiting for a press conference from the airlines.
So we have 4 major commercial aircraft which have been involved in either accidents or violence today. We have the 2 at the trade towers in New York City. We're not certain, but we believe both those are somehow connected to American Airlines. We're not sure of that, absolutely sure, and that news conference in Dallas is
north of the World Trade Center. The second building that was hit by the plane has just completely collapsed. The entire building has just collapsed, as if a demolition team set off. When you see the old demolitions of these old buildings, it folded down on itself, and it is not there anymore.
The whole side has collapsed?
The whole building has collapsed.
The whole building has collapsed?
The building has collapsed.
That's the southern tower you're talking about.
Exactly. The second building that we witnessed the airplane enter had been, the top half had been fully involved in flame. It just collapsed. There is panic on the streets. Thousands of people running up Church Street, which is what I'm looking out on, trying to get away. But the entire, at least as far as I can see, the top half of the building, at least half of it, I can't see below that, half of it just started with a gigantic rumble, folded in on itself, and collapsed in a huge plume of smoke and dust.
We're talking about massive casualties here at the moment, and we have, that is extraordinary.
There is panic on the streets. There are people screaming and running from the site. The gigantic plume of smoke has reached me, and I'm probably a quarter of a mile north of there.
Peter. My God. The southern tower. This is a place where thousands of people work. We have no idea what caused this. this day, Tuesday, both trade towers have now been attacked and destroyed, with thousands of people either in them or in the immediate area adjacent to them. There is simply no way to accurately describe the emotion this evokes.
Good morning. Finally, a president-elect. George W. Bush will become the 43rd president of the United States.
Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center.
We're going to take a look at videotape just moments ago of the second plane hitting the World Trade Center.
There has been another major explosion, this one in the nation's capital. There is smoke in the air over the Pentagon.
We are getting information now that one of the other buildings, Building 7 in the World Trade Center complex, is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing.
Building 7 I often hear about. No plane hit Building 7. Why did Building 7 come down? What do you tell people?
What is Building 7?
Or what, was it Building 5 or the building that wasn't hit by the plane? Building 7.
I have no idea. I've never heard that.
The Project for the New American Century, which is a think tank that was around in the 90s and up through 2005 or 6, there are about 17 members of this so-called think tank who were in top positions in the Bush-Cheney administration. And a couple of these guys, Feith and Wolfowitz, had earlier worked for Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel and put out a paper that advocated the same kind of program that they then put out papers from PNAC advocating. That is intense nationalism and militarism and going after Middle Eastern states with aggressive wars. There are several key papers that they published, and the biggest one maybe was in 2000 called Rebuilding America's Defenses, as if they needed to somehow be rebuilt.
This is being seen on Capitol Hill as another Pearl Harbor.
Israel's former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has publicly said the September 11th attacks have been good for Israel.
In the days after the September attacks, there were countless rumors about strange coincidences surrounding the events. One report about a group of Middle Eastern men spotted the morning of September 11th parked just across the river from New York City has not gone away. Investigation of their presence has led to questions about whether Israel was conducting espionage on U.S. soil.
It began when this woman was watching the Twin Towers burning from her apartment in New Jersey. She noticed 3 men on top of a van, posing for pictures with the towers burning in the background.
And I could see that they were like happy. You know, they didn't look shocked to me. You know, they didn't look shocked. I thought it was very strange.
The witness called police, who stopped the van hours later and arrested 5 men. All 5, it turns out, were Israeli. They were turned over to the FBI. Sources tell ABC News during a check of national security databases, some of the men were listed as having had connections with Israeli intelligence. At the FBI, that set off alarm bells.
The FBI needed the answers to 3 important questions. Who were these men? What brought them to that parking lot on the morning of September 11th? And did they have any advance knowledge of what was going to happen that day?
After 71 days, the 5 Israelis were deported.
Some U.S. investigators believe that there are Israelis again very much engaged in spying in and on the U.S. who may have known things they didn't tell us before September 11th.
The first part of the investigation focuses on Israelis who say they are art students from the University of Jerusalem and Bezalel Academy. They repeatedly made contact with U.S. government personnel, the report says, by saying they wanted to sell cheap art or handiwork. Documents say they, quote, targeted and penetrated military bases, the DEA, FBI, and dozens of other government facilities, and even secret offices and unlisted private homes of law enforcement and intelligence personnel. The majority of those questioned, quote, stated they served in military intelligence, electronic surveillance intercept, and/or explosive ordnance units.
Lobby, there was no lobby. So I believe the bomb hit the lobby first, and a couple of seconds in the first plane hit.
It just went ba-boom, it was like a bomb went off, and another explosion came right from it, just everyone flying.
There were numerous secondary explosions taking place in that building. There were continuous explosions.
No, the first explosion, and there was a second explosion in the same building. There were two explosions.
Okay. There was another explosion that took place in one of the towers here. So obviously, according to his theory, he thinks that there were actually devices that were planted in the building.
And you heard the boom, 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 boom.
Floor by floor, it started popping out.
It was like, if they had detonated. They were planned to take down a building. Boom, 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 boom.
From the corner, boom, 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 boom. Just like 20 straight hits. And as the bombs were going, people just started running. And I sat there and watched a few of them explode.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
In 2002, the Pentagon was infiltrated by Mossad. They did not need any identification to get through the river entrance of the building. They went upstairs to Douglas Feith. Occasionally, they went to the second most powerful man, Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and they had run of the Pentagon. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said to my boss one time, "Hell, I don't run my building. Mossad does."
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. So I came back to see him a few weeks later. And by that time, we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today. And he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
Obviously, we'd like to see a regime change, at least I would, in Iran, just as I would like to see in Iraq. The question now is a practical question. What is the best place to proceed? It's not a question of whether Iraq's regime should be taken out, but when should it be taken out?
In 2001, Congress passed the Authorization for Military Force, giving the president broad power to conduct military operations without congressional approval. Each time, it had to do with the American conflict with Iraq. But since then, both the Obama and Trump administration used what's better known as AUMF for other purposes.
Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
They can't have a nuclear weapon. Very simple.
So the only way that Iran will be stopped is if there is a credible military threat that ideally would be backed by the United States.
President Trump has just announced on social media that the U.S. has just completed 3 successful attacks on 3 nuclear sites in Iran.
If you look back to 1996, there was a study done for a fellow who was about to become prime minister for the first time. His name was Netanyahu. It was completed mostly by Americans. We later called them neocons. So they composed this thing and they called it a clean break, a new strategy for securing the realm. Okay, securing the realm. What realm? Well, the realm was Israel, Greater Israel.
מה זה?
זה הוויז'ן שלי, זה אחד הדברים שחלמתי עליהם, מפת הארץ המובטחת.
יפה.
הגיע הזמן, קוראים לזה ירושלם. אני לא נותן את זה לך, אני מעניק את זה לך כדי שתיתן את זה לארצך שרה.
תודה רבה.
אתה מתחבר לחזון?
מאוד.
באמת?
מאוד.
זה ישראל השלמה.
There is no possibility of conducting a